Hello there, boys and girls, and welcome to the Root of All Podcast, your place to go for finding the to listen to podcasts for the rest of 2019 and straight into 2020. I'm your host, well, one of them, Miles Newverth.
And I'm Devin Newverth. Still Devin Newverth over here.
Do you like my the new flavor I'm bringing to that intro? Do you like that?
Oh, it was fantastic, brother.
Excellent. I'm very excited. It's been a little bit since we've put out some podcast, but hoping everyone at home enjoyed the holiday season.
Yeah, hopefully everyone had a great American Thanksgiving.
Yes, and we're rolling straight through the rest of the holidays this year, and obviously the warm, bright, cheery holidays. You know, the family, the giving. These are all things that definitely went into consideration when we chose this week's theme, which is, of course, virtual reality.
Yeah.
Because nothing says time with the family like the number one way to get away from your family. VR can be a way to bring people together. I would love for you guys all to come out New York my way, because we currently have a 2 to 6 person virtual escape room that I would love for you guys to try out.
Oh, that sounds so fun.
It's rad. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so we're doing virtual reality, folks. We've picked some stuff. I don't know if it's come up in the past, but I'm a huge VR nerd.
I think you've mentioned that you do streaming for your virtual reality thing before in the past.
Yes.
So you definitely have some experience with virtual reality, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that should be fun to bring to the table.
Oh, yeah.
So what did you end up listening to this week, brother?
I listened to a podcast, if you can imagine that.
Whoa.
I kind of cheated, and I listened to 3 episodes of a podcast because it was a series. It was from American Innovations. Innovations. Yes, which is a part of the Wondery network. It is hosted by Steven Johnson, who is a best-selling author. Does a lot of tech writing and stuff like that.
Cool.
But it's very cool. This series in particular is very cool, and he does kind of goes through the history of VR, virtual reality, especially with computerized virtual reality video games and how we've gotten to there.
Yeah.
From computers being invented basically to there. But he does it in a very cool way. It's very much more like him telling a story of how it happened versus just dry facts of history.
That's fair. That does sound really interesting to me.
Yeah, he does a lot of little dramatizations of conversations between influential people.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, he does research of who got together on a project, and obviously they don't have a transcript of every conversation or every phone call or whatever that these people made. But he rather than just being at some point this famous person called this famous person and they decided to work together, he does a little dramatization. So it's a lot easier on the ears. There's a nice little soundtrack that's done. It's definitely, as far as audio quality goes, very, very nice. It covers a lot because the nice thing is that he does, the whole podcast is mini series.
Yeah.
Where he'll cover a topic completely. And so this particular series was 3 episodes. Some of them are a little longer than that, even if it's a bigger, more in-depth topic.
Sure.
I have the description of the podcast that they wrote for themselves. Let me go over that little paragraph here quick just to give an idea of the whole podcast.
Okay.
It just says, American Innovations, DNA science, artificial intelligence, smartphones, and 3D printers. Science and technology have transformed the world we live in. But how did we get here? It wasn't by accident. Well, sometimes it was. It was also the result of hard work, teamwork, and competition, and incredibly surprising moments. And so that's kind of what he goes over, is to just how he mentions briefly at the beginning of the first episode like painted panoramas from 2000 years ago. He mentions Viewmasters and how they use stereoscopic images to make a picture look 3D, but that's not a computer generated image doing that live while you. And then he kind of gets into the birth of VR, which leads me to kind of the first thing that jumped out at me, was that virtual reality, like computer-generated virtual reality, actually existed before a computer mouse did.
Which is delightful.
Which is awesome. The whole unit was called the Sword of Damocles.
Man, nerds really knew how to do it back then, you know?
It comes from mythology, and basically because this was in the late 60s, so computers, took up a whole room, if not rooms.
That reminds me of a point that I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
Because computers were these giant unwieldy things, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this group of the tech world who call virtual reality a gimmick, or say VR's dead before it even started. And I just can't help but remembering the people who were certain no one would ever need a personal computer. Or people who thought, why would you need to carry your phone with you? Or people who thought, man, a touchscreen phone? That's ridiculous. People who think VR is not going to be the future of not just gaming, but also huge amounts of the tech world, sound like they're going to clown college.
It's crazy. It's funny that you say that. So I'm talking about my podcast. I'm not going to get into a lot of the names in history, mostly because I can't remember them.
Right.
But one of the big minds behind virtual reality and getting there and thinking that it was something that needed to be worked on actually was one of the first people that talked about having a personal computer, like a portable personal computer. And he was working at Xerox at the time, which Xerox is where a lot of computer innovations came from, but they didn't release the products. They sat around and had these ideas, but they wouldn't implement the ideas as a product from Xerox. A lot of stuff from the original Apple Macintosh computer came from Xerox. But so when he was at Xerox and he had a box mock-up that he thought was the right size and weight of what a portable personal computer should be, and he had it full of lead balls to simulate the weight because it wasn't there was no computer that size and weight.
Was he thinking briefcase?
I'm not sure. It didn't get into that specifically.
All right.
But he they laughed at him. they because it was big and bulky and heavy, they just laughed at him, and now they're guess who was right.
The phone that I can literally juggle could run circles around the whatever we had growing up that ran Windows 95.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do we have personal computers, we have personal computers in our pocket. You have 2 of them in front of you right now. You have 3, including the laptop.
Yeah, it's crazy. The steps that have been made and the number of people that were like, that's ridiculous. Why would you ever do that? And that's kind of the first episode. So he does, like I said, he does 3 episodes in the series. The first episode talks about that first VR, the Sword of Damocles, which is this giant unit. The headset is so heavy that they had to have it connected to the ceiling. It came down off of the ceiling over your head and just looked imposing and dangerous. And that's why they call it the Sword of Damocles. It has nothing to do with a program. It wasn't a game or that's what the hardware was called, was the Sword of Damocles.
If I ever make a video game console, why would I ever do that? I would name it the Sword of Damocles.
That'd be pretty cool.
If I made a VR headset, I might call it that, just as a reference to those who came before.
But it was very cool that that concept has been around. It wasn't anything like what we have now.
I have questions about it.
Yeah.
Like, so it's a headset you put on, and so it's doing just a computer-generated stereoscopic image of a cube?
That's what he had described. I'm not sure exactly what it was all capable of. I don't know what kind of... like, if there's any kind of tracking of any movement, I don't know. I have no idea.
The thing all right, if I could get my hands on a piece of old tech, and presumably I could actually get my hands on this, but the thing I'm most curious about, like, how it functioned, like, what it actually did and how it worked, the Virtual Boy. Does he talk about the Virtual Boy?
Yes, he does later.
Okay, cool.
We'll get there. You're way ahead. Virtual Boy is like 3 decades from now. All right.
80s, isn't it?
Like late 80s.
Okay. So 2.5. All right.
Anyways, and it's like the Virtual Boy's not even real VR.
That's fair.
I mean, it's actually almost probably at the level that sort of Damocles was, but 2 decades later,
and significantly smaller.
Well, yeah, but still, there's way cooler stuff that we'll talk about right now.
Awesome.
So, talks about seeing that we for this first episode we follow Alan Kay. That's spelled Kay. Okay. That's pretty much the only name I remember from that episode.
Listen, if you can't mispronounce names if you don't remember them.
That's true. So Alan Kay, went to Utah and, like I said, was given access to see the Sword of Damocles and was kind of just fascinated by it. And then the mouse is invented, and the mouse was presented at this huge conference at like what has been described as like the mother of all presentations or something like that. Because the things that they were doing at that presentation changed how people thought of computers in such an insane way that it was like a transformative presentation. Because until the computers used to be basically giant calculators that you had to like use like punch cards and weird tape and stuff to access. Yeah. And then they invented an actual graphic interface, which allowed you to like use a keyboard and type into the computer and see the results instantly, which was crazy. But the idea of the mouse, where you're able to actually like reach into the computer and manipulate things by hand, was just paradigm shifting. So it was very, very cool. And so he was captivated by that because that gives you a way to move around in a virtual environment and control things in a virtual environment. And so that's what Alan Kay saw in that presentation, was kind of like he didn't see a computer mouse that you can point and click documents with. He saw a controller for a virtual reality headset. That's what he saw when he saw the computer mouse. So he ends up going to work for Xerox, and there's more to that story, but you should listen to the podcast if you want to hear it. He goes to work at Xerox. Xerox, like I said, has a lot of stuff that they innovate that is they don't actually release products. Do
they just get patents or what? Like what?
I'm honestly I don't know. But Alan Kay specifically was getting very frustrated because he wanted to be working on computers and virtual reality things that people would be able to actually put their hands on and use. Right around when he was working at Xerox, Atari started up, and they started making arcade machines. They did very well because people were just pumping quarters into Pong.
Yeah.
So Kay got very frustrated and ended up leaving Xerox. And so here's where
I really do. I empathize deeply.
The first episode and the second episode and the third episode are going to kind of get jumbled together here as I talk about them. So I'm definitely kind of just picking out the little bits that kind of stuck out to me. And at one point, I believe it's Kay.
Sure.
But he goes and he gets hired by Atari, which is huge at the time, because they just keep coming out with just home run after home run products that they're releasing and just everyone wants. And they hire Kay, and he is trying to make virtual reality happen for like an arcade game. And went to, I don't remember if it was MIT or UNC. It was one of the two. Actually, I think it was UNC. He went to UNC and saw that they had pretty good virtual reality. It was designed off of the images were designed off of this town. It was designed to kind of be like this little, just like info touristy little experience.
Okay.
But it actually had head tracking where they actually took pictures every 10 feet in this actual town, and it was the perfect place to do it because it was this town that was set up it was a tiny town that was set up in this perfect grid system, which is very easy for computers to map because it's all perfect squares, or as close as people can get to perfect squares.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So it was they took pictures every 10 feet and loaded that in and had the stereoscopic, imaging and stuff. And there was the head tracking there, but they had latency issues because of computers are slow and it's hard. And so if you move your head, the computer was having problems keeping up with you. And so something like less than 10% of people were getting sick from when they use VR of that style, where if you move your head too fast, you get nauseous. Latency it messes issues with your inner ear. Yeah. They actually had a name for it.
Simulation sickness? Simulation
sickness. That's it. That's what it's called. Simulation sickness. So he tried to basically buy the lab. He was like, I want to start from here and build that into an arcade game. And the professor was like, can't do that. It's the universities, and we can't just sell you stuff from it. But so he took a page from his mentor at Xerox, realized that he didn't need to have all of that equipment. They could buy and build new equipment. He just needed the people that built it. So he hired all the best students from there.
Yes.
To work for him to build VR, and they made a big VR experience and selling them to a lot of different companies. And then he got a call from Steven Spielberg, and he said, can you bring it out here to California? We want to try it out.
Okay.
And he was like, we don't, it's a room. Like, we can't, if I could just bring it on an airplane, I'd be right over there. But can you come see it? And they were like, no, they wanted to show it to a big executive at Universal Studios. And he was like, he's not going to fly out there to play your little computer game. If you want to bring it to him, you could make a lot of money. But he's not going to fly out to you.
It's a room, my dude.
So they went about recreating a new prototype that went inside a semi-truck bed.
Yes.
So it was mobile.
I love
Drove
this.
it out to California. And literally set it up outside of Universal Studios, California.
This is kind of my dream. Building just gutting a school bus, building into it a crazy immersive VR game and driving it around the country. I could be a VR entertainment gypsy. I don't think Ame would approve, but I could do it.
Yeah, I don't know about
and
that.
gypsy's not a great word. I apologize. Bad habits. Okay.
Yeah. Bad brother.
My apologies to the audience. I'm working on it. I'm trying to be better. Okay.
All right. So Steven Spielberg came down, the executive came down, and notice how I was comfortable saying Steven Spielberg's name, because that is a name that I know.
Yes.
I remember that one.
Both memorable and pronounceable.
Oh, yeah. So he brought the executive down, and the executive didn't even want to play the thing. He was like, I don't have time for that. Here's what I need to know. Are people going to throw up? And he's kind of concerned because that is an issue with simulation sickness where a small percentage of people struggle with the latency. And so he explains that. He's like, oh, I don't care about fixing it. I want people to throw up. I want there to be headlines that the janitor quit from cleaning up all the puke.
Yes, it becomes like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I love that.
So
Awesome.
that's that was what I loved about that little bit there. Just the fact that he was just like, no, they should throw up. Like, that's how a ride works.
Awesome. Man, I can't wait for like VR to become more a part of theme parks.
Yeah. The thing with VR becoming a part of theme parks is that the headsets, the technology needs to get so much cheaper.
Yes. 100%.
Because headsets are way too easy to damage.
I'm just saying the combination of like the movement of a roller coaster and like being able to overlay any visuals you want. Because right now they've done incredible things. Like the Harry Potter things are super cool and they do it, but like I do have issues at some points with simulation sickness in those, because like there are times when like they're simulating movement with the screens that isn't actually happening, and that'll get me at some points. Whereas in VR you could just, I don't know, you could just like make it look like you are doing those things actually around you, as opposed to screens making it feel like, I don't know. I think it could be cool. That's all. Are there any other fun points from your story?
So that happens, and then I don't remember at what point in the story, VR is used in NASA to like control robots.
Sick.
In space.
That's the future.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Right around the time, it's funny that Steven Spielberg is responsible for that other part of the story, because what killed VR for a long time probably is E.T.
Why?
Not the movie, the game for Atari.
Oh, it killed Atari.
Killed Atari.
Yeah. It's, yeah.
And so no one else with deep enough pockets had interest in funding it in that type of way, and computers that could do that kind of thing were expensive enough that you needed a real, like, literally the computers that they were like showcasing for Steven Spielberg and stuff, and for universities and stuff like that, were I want to say they were like $500,000 or like $1 million a piece. It was ridiculous. I mean, they were not cheap machines.
No.
Then he talks briefly about how you had like those cheap, really bad VR machines that were like malls, where it was like and those were awful. And then he talked about the Virtual Boy, which was not really VR.
No, what was it?
It was just a stereoscopic viewer for your game. Like it had no head tracking at all.
That makes sense.
It's just goggles that you wore to play the game.
But made it 3D?
It was stereoscopic, so yeah, made it 3D-ish, but it was it was vector and dumb and
okay, so stereoscopic, define this for me.
That's where you have the two pictures with slightly different angles, so it looks 3D.
Okay, I mean, so that's just how you get 3D. Okay.
Yeah, that's the idea behind making an image look 3D. It has nothing to do with computers. It has to do with just like I said,
how your brain works.
You were the ViewMaster, that little thing that you played with as a kid that you used to get in your stocking. That was stereoscopic pictures.
I don't remember it being in 3 dimensions. I really got to get my hands on one of these things.
I mean, the issue is there's no movement, and you can't go around the back side of a thing. It's 3D in the same way that it's 3D in a similar way that like the 3DS is 3D, or like
3DS
early 3D TVs were 3D. You get the picture from two angles, and it's like just looks. Things look like sticky outy a little bit. It's not like you could see the back of a thing. It just things look slightly more. Yeah. It's very cool, but the thing that makes it cool for VR is that you have that effect, and then you can literally turn around and look in every direction and go behind the thing.
Space, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's it's only a part of VR. Yeah. And then he jumps ahead to someone whose last name is Lucky, who invented the Oculus Rift.
Okay.
He was obsessed with VR and bought up like every virtual reality old thing that he could get his hands on, like old stuff from NASA and like anything he could get his hands on, he would buy and take apart to see how it worked. And he invented a thing. And
I'm really curious as to how... I know exactly how Steam did their early room scale tracking.
Yeah.
I'm super curious as to how Oculus first did it.
He didn't really get into the nitty-gritty tech stuff.
Sure.
Which is nice if you're not like a super tech-minded person.
Sure.
It's more accessible. So what he talks about with the Rift is that he had pulled apart all these VR headsets, these old VR headsets, just to see how they worked and kind of what was wrong with them and why they didn't work for a consumer thing.
Yeah.
And basically found that the computers weren't fast enough, which now they are. Mm-hmm. He found that the headsets were too heavy. And a lot of that was because of the way that... So the way that you create VR is with the two small stereoscopic images, right?
Yeah.
Which we just talked about is just two images that are taken from a different angle.
Yeah.
And because of that, though, you have field of view issues. If you just put those close to your face, you can see the edge of them and it ruins the effect.
Yeah.
So in order to fix that so that it took up more of your viewing area, they have the magnified lens.
Yeah.
But the problem is that magnified lens distorts the image. So you have to have more lenses to undistort the image. And they were big, giant glass lenses that were heavy. And so they switched to a plastic lens, which was much better at not distorting. But so he solved those three problems with the Oculus Rift and just kind of had that thing and was going to launch it on Kickstarter. I think it was Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But one of I don't remember if it was Alan Kay or if it was someone else big in VR, got a hold of him and wanted to buy a prototype from him just to check it out because he had heard good things and was curious. And because he had been researching, VR for his entire life, basically, he knew exactly who had just emailed him and basically said, like, I'd be too anxious to sell you one, but I would love to hear your input. Why don't I just borrow you one? So he borrowed him one, and he thought it was just really something special, but he took the prototype that he had been borrowed and messed with it. He was like, this is very good. But he changed one of the head tracking sensor. He changed the head tracking sensor out to a lower latency sensor and got like special firmware so that it was checking that sensor like 3 times as often. And then also realized that the lenses were much lighter, but you still had a slightly distorted image. And so he figured out that he could just have the computer distort the image itself. And then through the lens, you would get an undistorted image. So, and that's where if you have VR that like Gear VR or something like that, and you hook it up and tell it to do VR and then actually look at it not through the lens, the picture doesn't just look smaller and cut in half. It actually is like weird shaped.
Yeah.
And that's because it's taken the lenses into account, which is super cool.
Yeah.
But so it's so he just did that and then contacted Lucky again, and Lucky was like, "Great,
thanks,
cool, thanks for fixing that. That's super cool." Like he just like took a prototype and tinkered with it, and
my feedback is I made it better.
Yeah,
rad.
It was pretty cool. Here
good feedback.
Now it's better. And then they launched on Kickstarter with a goal. They had talked to people, and people were trying to talk him into having a goal of $500,000, and he was like, "I don't know, man. That this is just like a goofy thing for VR nerds. Like, I don't think that we'd be able to raise that much money." But they kept pushing him, and so he ended up making his goal $250,000, and they met that goal in 2 hours. They eventually ended up releasing the dev kits and to mix reviews just because they were dev kits and there wasn't a lot of software for them at that time.
Yeah.
It was a cool thing, and there was only $300, but you had to have a $2,000 computer at the time to actually run the thing.
Yeah.
And there was no software for it hardly. Other than, some demo stuff, there was no real software for it. And so he ended up having a meeting with Mr. Facebook.
The Zuck.
Yeah. And just to try to get him to invest. And he tried it and decided that he wanted to buy the company instead. Which happened. Which we live in the future of then. So we know that they did buy it. But he saw the Oculus as a way of connecting people like Facebook does, but even on a higher level than Facebook does.
I think it will be when it's more affordable.
It's too expensive right now.
I think we've made the first real step into putting VR in every home. And I'll talk about that once it's my turn.
Oh yeah? Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. That's pretty much my story does talk about how Lucky ended up leaving Facebook because of racism.
What?
Because he had given money to alt-right organizations, I guess.
Oh, so he was the racist.
And then handled that wrong by first denying it, and then apologizing, and then just kind of disappearing.
Sure.
So that's how that tale kind of ends. I don't feel too bad about giving away the ending just because there's a lot of story that I didn't cover.
Yeah.
And that's not really... everyone knows what's happening with VR now, for the most part. So you should get going with your podcast. Let me just give my contact information really quickly.
Okay.
All right. Like I said, it is American Innovations. It is from the Wondery Network. I could not find a Twitter for the actual podcast. But he has a personal Twitter. The host does. It's at Stephen B. Johnson. And you can also find the podcast at Wondery.com and all the information about it there. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your podcast, brother, now that I've taken up all of our time.
All of the time. You're going to have to edit this out because I'm going to get more coffee really quick.
Okay.
All right.
Great. All right. So now it's your turn.
Delightful. So your story basically went up until... basically... right where modern VR starts to take form. My podcast is actually entirely about VR. It's called FReality, and it talks about weekly VR, AR, and MR news, which is virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality.
Very cool. What's the difference between augmented reality and mixed reality?
Yeah, I've tried to figure this out, but I haven't been able to get my hands on one. I've tried augmented reality with the Microsoft HoloLens. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in virtual reality. I couldn't tell you what the Windows mixed reality headsets do. And I haven't gotten to an episode in the podcast where they actually mention that.
So it's just one of those things where I've heard both terms and I didn't know if it was to me it sounds kind of like all-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive.
Right.
Where people know there's a difference. But it's really hard to get someone to nail down the difference because vehicles have 4 wheels. That's how many wheels there are.
Yeah.
So if it's all wheels, that means 4 wheels are driving.
From the way I've seen people with these headsets talk about it, it seems closer to a VR headset than an AR headset.
Okay.
Because the tech for VR headsets is a lot further along than the tech for augmented reality headsets currently.
Yeah, well, it's tricky. Augmented reality is hard.
I think we're going to get there pretty quick now that we have things that can do room tracking without sensors. I think things like the Quest are going to make augmented reality go a lot quicker.
The thing with augmented reality for me is that you have to be in a much more controlled space. You have to be in much more control of your environment of what you can interact with augmented wise. I feel like augmented reality could be really cool in in a theme park type setting.
That's my dream.
Where you're in complete control of the situation. You can literally have everything all mapped out and in I've seen an augmented reality headset type device that uses a retroreflector mat. So you're able to see things on this mat like they're in 3 dimensions, which is very cool. But you'd have to have a big special mat. You can't just like set it up and like see a thing on your table or like, you know, pick up a thing that's not there. Like you have to have a very specific surface to use.
See, I've seen AR work very well without that. So I've tried the HoloLens, but when I was trying it, basically I was in this room. It was just a regular type room. But they loaded up a program and there was suddenly a map of our solar system like orbiting in front of me.
In the room.
That I could like physically walk around and see. It was very cool. Unfortunately, for the first HoloLens, it was a small square of like where I can actually see this thing.
Oh.
So like if I'm back far enough and I see the whole solar system within that, whatever the square is, a quarter of my field of vision in front of me, it's a cool effect. But when I go closer and it cuts off, which I understand there are a lot of reasons for that, but it ruins the effect. And I've heard the HoloLens 2 has a much larger field of view, which I would be very excited to see. What I want is augmented reality, like go-kart tracks.
Yeah.
I want people to be able to like go-kart down a track, and like everyone could have a different overlay if they wanted to. You could pick one. Like, oh, I'm going to do this track as the jungle, or I'm going to do this track as inside of a volcano.
I feel like moving at the speeds that a go-kart moves, that would require a lot of processing from a computer to track and refresh at that rate of movement. I feel like we would need a lot of processing.
That's fair. You could. So the HoloLens is an entirely standalone device. If you had something like that hooked up to a computer, I think you could do it. And you could build the computers into the go-karts.
Yeah.
Just have it like back behind the seat, have a wire connecting you to your cable. Have someone come around, take off the headset when you get out. And that's now. Like in 3 years, potentially, we could do this without the thing. Like having experienced like PC-less VR that I'm not disappointed with for the first time in my life. Like the sky's the limit at this point.
Yeah.
But enough about AR. We're talking about virtual reality today. So FReality. I haven't talked about my podcast at all. It is so the ways you can consume this podcast will tell you a little bit about who I think the algorithm will recommend this for. But first of all, they broadcast it on like YouTube and Facebook while they're recording. Like they stream it there. You can get it on your pod chaser of choice, whatever it's called, podcatcher of choice.
Yeah.
But you can also watch the live showing in rooms in VR. Like they broadcast it to a program called Big Screen VR. And if you watch it there, you can join in rooms with other people who are watching. It has rooms of up to 8 people, and you're just in a movie theater together. And you can like chat and hang out while you're watching this podcast live, which I think is very cool.
Yeah.
Our hosts are Rowdy Guy. Rowdy Guy is his name. Nathy, Mike from Virtual Reality Oasis, and ZimTalk5.
That's all their Christian names, obviously.
Yes. Well, and they're delightful. Like each of them has like certain segments they'll do. They'll talk about new VR releases that week. They'll talk about the news. Like if one of them ends up going to an event, they'll talk about that. I listened to 2 episodes, which is huge for me.
Way to go!
Never before. Never before. I'll talk about the most recent one. No, I'm going to talk about the one 2 episodes ago. On November 24th, episode 116. Their episode names just kind of list things they're going to talk about. So this one's called Half-Life Alyx Announced, Oculus Link in Beta, and Star Wars VR Launches.
Ooh.
Yeah. They do just end up talking a lot about like specific news and like what they think that means for the future of VR. Like these people are all very, very passionate about it. And I think that's why I've started to love this podcast. It's rare for me to run into someone who feels about VR the way that I do. Like people come into my place of work because I work at the virtual reality arcade and ask me questions, and I will just start outpouring virtual reality knowledge on these people. And like more than half the time I can see them being like, okay, cool, bye. Like, The poor parents who bring their kids in, like their kids are on the machine and their dad absentmindedly asks a question and he's stuck with me. So like I just start going off. But like, so in this one they talk about like, so much of this podcast doesn't make sense without context. PC gaming was changed forever when Valve was a software company and they released a game called Half-Life 2. Mm-hmm. Do you remember Half-Life 2, brother? Didn't it come in the orange box?
Yes it did.
Yeah. So we got more use out of Portal from the orange box.
Oh yeah, I love Portal.
But Portal was possible because of the physics engine they made for Half-Life 2.
Oh yeah.
Half-Life 2 upped the game on like the idea of a physics engine in PC gaming in a way that like things hadn't before. So Half-Life changed PC gaming forever. And people have been looking for Half-Life 3 for so long. What I don't understand is people have watched Steam be like one of the main proponents of the Vive. They've watched them develop their own headset. They've watched them be like the main market for VR games. So when Valve finally decided to make a new Half-Life game and it's in VR, like how are people shocked? Like last time they touched games, like this isn't true, but like they pushed the medium for. It's like people who are baffled by George Lucas using 3D like computer effects in the prequels. Like, of course he did. Like, the thing George did with the original trilogy was take the technology they had for movies and push it as far as he possibly could. So when he started making another series of movies, he took the current technology, which was CGI, and pushed it as far as he possibly could. Like, you can argue about the results, but like, of course that's what he did. It's what he wanted to do. So when Valve got back into it, they're going to take what they see as the future of gaming, and they're going to push it as far as they possibly can.
I don't know that you necessarily want to compare that to the prequel trilogies, brother.
Listen, I'm just saying, like, of course they're going to innovate. Of course they were going to do VR. They've been playing with VR
I
for
agree
so
with
long.
that. I agree with that 100%. That makes sense. Especially, well, they have put a bunch of money into VR, and they know that the internet has been waiting for one of the biggest memes on the internet is when is Half-Life 3 coming?
Yeah, Half-Life 3 confirmed.
Yeah.
What I'm excited for is they released Alex. They've talked about like the new engine they built for it. They've been saying we will have this engine available for people to like make Half-Life levels and mods and such. But they also said they're making 3 VR games. And if they're going off of their most beloved intellectual properties, we may be seeing a Left 4 Dead VR and Portal VR, which I would be very excited for.
I wouldn't be surprised if they do Portal VR at all. They had a demo that they made that was like in the Portal universe.
Aperture the Lab. It was the first program I ever played because it's free.
Yeah.
It's a great, beautiful program, a whole bunch of beautiful tech demos of how VR can be used, and it's entirely free. Like, they've been like the one step it's just Miles's VR opinions at this point. The one step that I'm irritated about with Valve is like they seem to have done all this work to make VR more accessible, and then when they develop their own headset, they make it the most, like, not the most, but one of the most expensive consumer headsets on the market. Like, the last thing, like, yes, you've done a beautiful job. This headset's incredible. The controllers look amazing. Like, I want a set of these controllers, which I can use with my current headset, which is nice, but we didn't need a more expensive VR headset. It's why Oculus is going to win this war.
Yeah, it's there are a lot of high-end headsets. The race needs to be to the bottom pricing wise. That is a good experience as cheap as possible. It doesn't even have to be the best experience. It just has to be a good, usable experience as cheap as possible. It has to be
real VR, which I don't count cell phone VR as real VR.
No, it has to be like like space tracking VR. Like not, you need 6 degrees of motion, not 3, in order to be in order to be able to do what VR needs to be able to do. Sony's VR is good just because it runs on the console, which is the cheapest 100%. Computer that you can run VR on.
It's my least favorite headset that I will still call real VR. It's real VR, I'm going to tell you why the Oculus Quest is going to win the war.
Go ahead.
Oculus Quest is a good standalone PC-less headset. It's $300 and change, maybe $400, which is expensive, but you don't also need a $800 computer to run it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it is not PC quality VR, but it's good. It runs a lot of the best programs that VR has, the most popular programs VR has, well. So it gives you a good standalone experience that if you're just getting into VR, it's a great way to do it. But the reason it's brilliant is because they just released Oculus Link. So say I get a Quest for my standalone VR. I love it. I'm having an incredible time. And I'm thinking about trying PC VR, but I don't want to get a PC and a new headset. I can attach my Quest to my computer, and it works as a PC quality VR headset with almost no noticeable difference from Oculus's actual PC VR headset.
Huh.
Yes.
That's very cool.
It's brilliant. So
how does it hook up to so it doesn't hook up to a computer. How does it do room sensing?
So this is the new tech. My thing is it irritates me because it is a more convenient technology and it is the future of VR. It's just less precise than the Vive that I have. The original Vive uses 2 lighthouses to track a whole room, and it has just incredible room tracking, and I love it very much. The Oculus had its 2 little sensors, which were good for like forward-facing VR, but not great for room scale.
Yeah.
The Oculus S uses its external cameras. You set your Guardian boundaries, and it uses the cameras to track the area around you, and it does room tracking that way.
Oh, okay.
Which is very reminiscent of I think it's the Vives, but one of Valve's first room tracking tests.
Yeah.
What they did was they had a room they just put a crap load of QR codes on the walls and floor, and the headset had cameras that would read the different QR codes and know where it was facing because of that. Yeah. So basically it's doing that, but with just the cameras.
Yeah, well, so it doesn't need a QR code. It's gotten good enough where it can recognize a shape and be like, that shape is there and now it moved, or something like that. It marks a spot somehow. Yeah. And is able to.
My only issue that I have with the Quest is because of the way my arcade uses it. We use it for Richie's plank experience. So we need it to line up exactly with a plank every time. And their room scale tracking is good enough for most VR experiences where you don't need something in the real world to line up perfectly with your VR. Yeah. But we do, so I need to reset it every time I put someone in the headset, and that is irritating. Whereas, I wish I could throw, a couple QR code stickers on the plank and have it track those automatically. If that was an option, my life would be made.
Yeah, that sounds like something that could be fixed in software, though.
You would think.
Well, the issue is it'd have to be something the game developer made an option.
The guys at Richie's, and Richie's, I doubt they're doing it. Richie's plank experience is great because it shows off the reason VR is so compelling, and it does it in a 3-minute experience. The thing about VR is the graphics are not as good. You have some games that try and get close or take some shortcuts to get good looking graphics. Yeah. Richie's is this world looks cartoony. But we're going to bring you up 50 stories in the air and open those doors of the elevator, and you're going to freak out anyway. You're going to know the ground is an inch away. You're going to see that this does not look like the real world, actually, and you're still going to be scared to leave the elevator. Because what VR can show you is depth. You don't need the incredible high-fidelity graphics because the tracking and the 3D sell the world to you so well. Yeah. And that's the thing. When people are watching clips of VR, they don't get it. So when someone comes into my arcade and they are doubtful, I put them in Richie's Plank experience, and when that elevator door opens and their palms start sweating, they are sold.
Yeah. Honestly, I haven't been looking into VR in a while because the fact that you need a bit, an expensive computer to run it, and it's I love the idea of being able to play some of those VR games. Honestly, so I have a gym membership, right? Right. And I'll go to the gym and I'll go and walk at the gym or whatever, and I go to do the little circuit or whatever. But I can tell you that I don't have a VR in my house, but I went to a VR place kind of like where you work, where they have big section. Yours actually sounds like it's more thought out. Like, this is literally, they have a room that they've, like, cordoned out, and they have individual headsets set up throughout the space.
We do, like, most of our experiences have, like, simulators or hardware outside of just the headset that we use, because we want to give, like, a heightened experience.
Yeah, so this is just, like, straight VR. Yeah. And, like, doing that we had an hour of that, where me and Hannah were both playing. And I got a much better workout doing that, and I had a lot of fun doing it in like, half of that hour than I ever have going to the gym.
Hit me. What'd you play?
It's been a while, brother. You're gonna have to help me with some of the names of some of the games. We played an archery game.
Was it in the lab? Like, was it like
no
stick people? Was it Elven Assassin?
It was like a castle defender type game, but with archery.
Might have been Elven Assassin. Were the guys giant orcs?
Maybe.
All right,
there are like cartoony type orcs. Maybe, I don't remember.
There are a couple options, but archery type game.
Yeah, which is hard for me to play because the archery mechanic, the arrow doesn't always fly straight, and so
there are better programs for that. There are some really good archery programs out there.
Yeah. It's in that particular game I struggled a little bit just because aiming a bow and it didn't always, it would like shoot in an arc. I just made an arc motion with my arm, which is going to make great podcast.
Yeah.
There was what was that game where things only move when you move?
Super Hot.
Yeah, Super Hot. That game was my favorite. Honestly, I played that probably the most. I played that probably the most. I love that game.
It's not my favorite VR program. I think it's the killer app of VR. I think it should be more popular than Beat Saber. I think Beat Saber's a great game. I just think Super Hot's more innovative.
Beat Saber, that's the like weird music one,
it's
right?
A rhythm
no.
Game. It's a rhythm game. It's like rhythm game mixed with Fruit Ninja. We describe it as like Dance Dance Revolution mixed with Fruit Ninja.
Yeah.
But you just have to say it's a rhythm game. I played it for the first time. We've had it at the arcade for like 5 months, and I finally got to play it last night because it was slow. It's an incredible game, and the thing is, it's a great workout.
Yeah.
So I get it, and especially like people who like rhythm games, like it's just a way more compelling, like immersive rhythm game, and it feels rad. I just think Super Hot's better because it's more my speed, and I think it's a more innovative idea.
It was super cool. We also played Keep Talking and Nobody Dies or whatever, the
Keep
bomb
Talking
defusing
and
game.
Explodes. Yep.
Yeah. That was tricky.
Yes.
We didn't die one time, but then we did die the other time.
Sure.
The weird thing is that it's like the time that we diffused it, I was trying to describe one of the little pictogram things, and like she got it wrong, but somehow we still didn't mess it up.
Interesting. Okay.
She didn't realize what I was trying to describe, but somehow we still didn't mess it up. It was very weird. The other thing is that it was almost too easy to cheat there, because at that location they had the VR and then they had an actual screen hook up to it as well.
Yeah.
So you could see what was happening, and you just had to like not do that.
Because
otherwise you're cheating.
Left one. Yeah.
Yeah.
The purpose is that you're not seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that was kind of fun to play. To play a 1-person game as a 2-person game, basically. It's kind of cool to play. A game like that in VR.
I think more people should make like asymmetrical multiplayer in VR, because there are a couple games that'll do it where you have people like playing on the TV screen with controllers and you have a person in VR. I think VR, like I think more people should invest in that personally.
The other thing is that I really want to play that Star Trek game, the Bridge Crew game.
It's probably dead at this point, but I would love, if I could get a crew together, I'd love to do it. I own it.
Yeah.
I just don't have friends with it. I doubt that one's on the Quest, but...
Probably not.
What I'm saying is a lot of these cool experiences you could do on Quest, and if you decided to get a computer later, you could then use the Quest. So I'm a huge proponent.
That's true. I might have to look into it. I'm really glad that we spent like 15 minutes of our podcast you trying to talk me into getting a VR headset.
I need VR friends.
Anyone who wants to play VR with Miles, hit him up on Twitter.
We can do our first live show in VR chat. Our first live show.
He will gladly play VR with you. Just hit him up on Twitter.
All right, guys. Here's the thing. The podcast I listened to this week was great, but it was news. So VR. Half-Life Alyx is coming out, and it looks awesome. What else happened in this particular episode? The Oculus Link, which is the thing that turns the Quest into a PC headset, is in beta right now. By the end of the year, they're going to have a Oculus branded cable to use. That'll work because right now people are having issues with using off-brand cables to try and use the beta. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's because it's in beta. Vader Immortal, the third installment, was thought to be okay by some and disappointing by others. It's hard to talk about a news podcast other than saying, if you have any interest in VR, you'll love it. If me rambling for the last bit of time was interesting in any way, it's like that, but they have more access to resources in VR. Yeah, I loved this podcast. I'm just not entirely sure how to talk about it. It's a great group of personalities. They riff off of each other very well without getting too carried away on tangents. Unlike some people I know, Miles.
Oh yeah, because I never go off on tangents.
Yeah, honestly, this is...
we don't believe in tangents here at the Root of All Podcasts.
Yeah, but we should probably throw this over to the algorithm.
Probably.
Alright, and I'm getting results right here. Yep, alright, so this is pretty much what I thought it was going to be. As a podcast you can literally watch in VR. This is a podcast for VR enthusiasts. If you're curious about VR, you can check this out. But if you have VR and want to keep up to date with new releases, if you want to just see people who are making moves in the industry, finding out the general news, this is a podcast for you. Check it out.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. We've got American Innovations. Their virtual reality series is recommended for virtual reality enthusiasts and people who are just curious about learning about the history of computers in general. People who are curious what took VR so long to get here. If it if it existed in the 60s and it just actually showed up 3 years ago, what took so long? If you want to know what took so long, listen to the virtual reality series on American Innovations.
I downloaded it while you were talking about it.
It's also recommended for Miles Newverth, specifically. Yeah. It says right there on the bottom.
Wild. So. It's a good algorithm.
Yeah,
it knows.
Very precise.
It knows things. Yeah, thank you guys for listening to this. Devin suggested this and I was excited, but I knew it was going to be this. I knew that this was what it was always going to be, is me rambling helplessly about virtual reality.
That's okay.
Thank you for putting up with it. Or if you're curious about VR, if you want to see it in action, most Wednesdays, if not every Wednesday, I'm streaming from 5 to 6 on Twisted Reality AR VR on Facebook, on their YouTube, on Twitch. Also, Escape Virtuality, the VR arcade I work at, we also stream directly to their Facebook now as well. So check it out. You can see me in a Vive headset using one of the omnidirectional treadmills on the market right now, the Catwalk Mini. So yeah,
that looks very cool. Actually,
it's neat.
So yeah, thanks so much for listening, especially if you put up with all the rambling that we just did. Thanks so much to Mom for letting us use her computer. Mm-hmm. I have a retraction. Really quickly, last episode we talked about dessert salads.
Yeah.
And Snicker salad in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I've been informed by our mother that Snicker salad generally has apples in it.
Huh.
I said it did not have fruit. I was wrong.
All right.
I apologize.
Good to know.
That was a wrong, bad thing that I said.
I think we finally made it. We have a corrections corner. I think we've made it.
So, thanks to we know at least one person listened to the episode. And that was our mother.
All right.
Because she corrected a thing I said.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, Mom.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ame, for letting me use your microphone. Thank you, Dad, for our computer noises.
Thanks for helping program the algorithm.
Yeah, and I have to go do laundry, so I'm going to run off. But
yeah, you go do laundry.
Very much, brother.
People should find us on the internet, where the internet things are. We have a Twitter and a Facebook at Root of Pod. We have a Pod Chaser where you can review us, aside from the Apple podcasts. The URL for that, we have a special URL for that. It is podchaser.com/rootofpodcasts.
Nice.
So, yeah, check us out there, and that should be everything.
Yeah.
Love you, brother.
Love you, brother.